Hello, everyone. Um, I think it's about time to get started. So we'll go ahead and get going here. Can everybody hear me okay? Volume's good. So I need to do my projecting voice. All right. With my projecting voice, I have no doubt that people can hear. So my name is John Hopkins. For those of you who don't know me, I am associate professor here at NYU and at the Institute of Fine Arts. And on behalf also of Francesco De Angelis, who I am privileged to serve beside as co-director of the New York Workshop of Etruscan Art, I am delighted to welcome you all here tonight. So before I introduce our speaker, I have to and want to do a few housekeeping matters. Mainly, I want to thank a number of people who have been instrumental in making tonight possible. And especially I want to thank the folks who have made this evening possible. We owe a great debt of gratitude to Columbia University, to the Institute of Fine Arts, and to the Center for Ancient Studies. Francesco and I will thank Columbia and the Institute of Fine Arts tomorrow and on Saturday when we are at those venues, so I'm not going to spend 20 minutes going through all of the thanks that we owe. But I do want to take time tonight to thank Matthew Santarocco and the Center for Ancient Studies and Anna Donch, who is a program administrator of the Center for Ancient Studies, for all of their support in making this event possible. Without their financial backing and their material support, we would all be sitting out in Washington Square on a grassy knoll, and I would be pantomiming bronze statues for you all for the next hour. Thankfully, we're not doing that. I also want to thank Akim Flavors in the Department of Art History for his special help in making this possible. And then I want to thank the King Juan Carlos I of Spain Center, our host for the night, our venue for the night, and everyone at the center who has helped us. And lastly, but very certainly not leastly, our assistants for the evening, Jule Van Haver and Hannah Laughlin, two graduate students from the Institute of Fine Arts who have made this possible, and Adam Johnson from Campus Media, who is entirely responsible for making the technical side of this go off without a hitch. So that's that. Now I want to express my excitement, my enthusiasm, which I'm sure we all share, that finally we are gathered again in person this year for the New York Workshop of Etruscan and Italic Art. I'm sure I speak for everyone in this room and online when I say how delighted I am to have these next few days devoted to the body, healing, and baths, and to sarcophagi, gems, and mirrors, which we will get into a little bit more tomorrow afternoon. Francesco and I also will introduce those portions tomorrow, and then we're all especially happy this year to have the opportunity finally to celebrate our dear colleague Larissa Bonfante on Saturday morning. And so that will be a special and long-awaited day. Tonight, though, we are delighted to open these proceedings with a truly exciting keynote. This past year has been one of historic discoveries and exciting information about Etruscan and Italic art and archaeology. Many of our colleagues have continued to carry out important excavations and archival study of materials, ongoing work from Vulci, Murlo, Pirgi, Faleri Veteris, and Novi now, Cetamura, across the Apennines, I'm not going to name every site, down to Pestum, where we've just gotten news of even more exciting finds, have all unearthed new contexts and new finds of previously unknown temples, domestic spaces, urban landscapes, and bronze sculptures. It's a thrilling moment to be in the field, and I really mean that, for me especially. The subject of tonight's keynote is landmark in its importance for the scale of the finds, certainly, but as our speaker has repeatedly made clear in other venues, it has been the careful research and planning and the painstaking excavation and documentation of the context of these finds, what Jacopo has described as a constant fight against water and hot mud, that brings such transformational significance and clarity to their presence. All of our colleagues working to properly excavate materials are doing this kind of labor. And the sensational nature of the images that you will see tonight belies years of quiet, diligent collaboration between the Ministero della Cultura the Università per Stranieri di Siena, and Professor Tabolli's huge international team. The less sensational labor assured that these finds would not only be beautiful, striking objects, but more importantly, field-altering evidence of actions that will undoubtedly reframe our view of Etruscan, Roman, and Italic interactions across a period of immense socio-political change. So in this way, tonight's keynote is special because it demonstrates what occurs when extraordinary care and archaeological practice meets with something truly rare. So we are privileged to have with us Professor Jacopo Tabolli, who is the Director of Archaeological Excavations at San Casciano dei Bagni, the Etruscan and Roman sanctuary at Bagno Grande. He is also Assistant Professor of Etruscology and Italic Archaeology at the Università per Stranieri di Siena. Professor Tabolli's CV is far too long for me to go through in its entirety, so I will not do that, but I do think it's important to give you a sense of who you're listening to. While a fellow and visiting professor at Trinity College Dublin and at the University of Cyprus, and while funzionario at the Soprintendenza Archeologia, Belle Arti e Passaggio per le province di Siena, Grosseto e Arezzo, and while professor at Siena, he has been a prolific scholar. His books and edited volumes, which I think now number close to 10, and his dozens of articles and book chapters treat his excavations at San Casciano dei Bagni, certainly. That has been a recent focus, but also his work in the waters off the island of Giglio and excavation on Cyprus. The excavation at Bagno Grande has benefited from several discrete threads of his scholarly interests that now have become entangled, to use our archaeological parlance. Particularly, I'm thinking of his study of legal and illegal excavations and their meaningfulness to Italian patrimony since unification, and his study of Hellenistic, Etruscan, and Italic bronzes, including the long, thin statues that we often call shadows or ombre, and which are associated with devotion, belief, and sacred life. Indeed, across his work, Professor Tabolli has focused on Etruscan, not so much life as lives, and I mean that quite literally. His work on burial generally, and especially infant and child burial rites and funerary contexts and ideologies, has begun to reorient the field. And while focusing on Narce and Vei, his study of the Agarfeliscus generally has already had what some might call a transformational effect in that area of Etruscology. He's also worked extensively in healing cults beyond the Bagno Grande sanctuary, particularly at an important healing cult at Narce, and on the intersection of political space, sanctuaries, and the idea of a soul and sacred practice in Etruscan and Etruria broadly. So what better steward could we have for such a site? And I will not take up any more of your time because you're here to listen to Professor Tabolli. Without any further ado, please tell us about these gods from the mud. Professor Tabolli.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Francesco, for inviting me today. It's really an honor for me to be here. It's the first time we are presenting the discoveries of San Casciano dei Bagni outside Europe. So it's truly a pleasure for me to guide you tonight into the excavation. Now, as John just said, this is not my work. It's a work of a team. So you see myself speaking tonight, but on my side, you should imagine at least two other persons. One is Emanuele Mariotti, who is the field director, and the other is Ada Salvi, who's the archaeological officer from the Sovrintendenza, from the Ministry of Culture. Now, why am I stressing this? Because such a complex excavation that involves different scholars, different disciplines, requires a large group of people working together. This means students, more than 60 students together with us, excavating in the hot mud, and scholars, different institutions together. So let me bring you to the southernmost part of the province of Siena, just a few hundred meters from two different regions. It's not Tuscany, Umbria to the north and Lazio to the south. The location of this beautiful medieval village, San Casciano dei Bagni, is famous worldwide, and it's a tiny village, just 1,500 people. on a very large part of Tuscany in a system of valleys which mark the southernmost border of the region. Now, this is an area that has strong identity and tradition. One of the most typical image of San Casciano dei Bagni is the creation of the local pici, which is the most typical pasta for whoever tried it. And that has been now branded as one of the most important, and not only in terms of like presentation of the culture, but it's the identity of a community, as we will see in my talk, that has always praised and believed that preservation of cultural heritage is not something that has to be only played by the state or by academics. The first protagonist of this story is the local community. So now a landscape that is a different landscape. It's a frontier landscape. So it means that it crosses different valleys and systems. On the one side to the left, the Clanis Valley, the large river that was flowing from north to south in the Val di Chiana. So it was going from Arezzo basically towards Orvieto. And this river, as you all know, was somehow blocked by the Romans during the Empire of Tiberius. And then slowly, through a genius project of Leonardo da Vinci, was pushed towards the north, towards the Arno. Now, on the other side, the Val di Paglia, it's a completely different landscape with the mountain of Amiata on top of it. It almost looks like a desert. And then the beautiful postcard of the Val d'Orcia, the UNESCO site, that now is worldwide known since it was declared World Cultural Heritage, of course. And I used to say, if this is not the environment, I should say that this is definitely not the space in which the gladiator was dreaming about his past. So this is to say that in a single region, in a single area, in the administrative borders of this municipality, we have different landscape, and regionalism is something that is so important in archaeology everywhere, but here has a specific core. And by regardless of the different landscapes, there is one characteristic that unifies the area, which is the thermomineral water, the hot water. Regardless of the different valleys, this is the region in Europe with the highest percentages of thermal mineral sites, hot water basically. And most of these sites, probably all of you have seen the beautiful pools of Bagno Vignone, which is in San Quirico d'Orcia, just a little bit north from San Casciano dei Bagni. The Medici built a large pool and a portico on top of what was a previous pool by the Roman, during the Roman time, sacred to the nymphs, as we know from an inscription that it's now within the wall of a local church. Now, the location of San Casciano with this geothermal environment is at the border, has always been at the border. So not only the political border between different regions in Italy, in central Italy now, but the map that you see to the right is the separation between the Granducato di Toscana, so Tuscany, to the left, and the Papal State to the right. But this position, this location, which is on the fringe of the mountain Cetona, as you can see from the star, reflects the long history of the border of one of the ancient city-states of the Etruscans. So first millennium BC, the city-states of Etruria, after the creation of the early cities around 1000 BC, were more than 12 actually, but let's stick to the account of 12, and Chiusi was the most important leading city-state of the region. Now this map was done exactly 100 years ago by the father of Roman archaeology, which is Ranuccio Bianchi Bandinelli, that you see to the left, the archaeologist from Siena, who he was just 23 and defended his dissertation on the 13th of December, 1923. So we're actually celebrating the birthday of 100 years of Ranuccio Bianchi Bandinelli in front of Giulio Quilino Giglioli, so at Sapienza University. And Ranuccio Bianchi Bandinelli is an archaeologist that Siena loves so much that has dedicated to this key figure a street without end in the periphery behind the station. So basically, there's always been a hard interaction between the high elite tradition of archaeology of Bianchi Bandinelli, its root and its legacy. But now this map is probably the most comprehensive map of the archaeology of Chiusi. So from the Perugia, south of Perugia, from the Trasimeno Lake to the Ombrone. It's a beautiful region, and the location of the star shows the position of San Casciano. Now, very briefly, late Bronze Age, 11th century BC, lots of communities in the area spread out on top of hills, and then the system collapsed around 1000 BC. This is the time in which on hills or large plateaus, cities were created. These are the proto-urban revolution. And Chiusi is one of these city-states, and it's a landscape. You see the hills of Cetona with the Bronze Age site and the hill of Chiusi, and it's a landscape of water. So related hot water, but not only hot water, the large Clanis was flowing in the area. So this tells us about the rich and powerful internal Etruria city. There's no way, no real direct communication or to the seashore. And if you have to imagine what's the location of San Casciano dei Bagni in the map of the first millennium BC, you'll see the territory of the city-state of Chiusi, and we are really close by to the capital, to Orvieto, Velsna, but we're not even far away, as we will see from the discoveries at San Casciano from Perugia towards the north and Vulci towards the sea. So basically, San Casciano is on the route that from the main town, people used to go towards the sea. And these are the pools. When we arrived in San Casciano, it was back 2018, I was the archaeological officer for the Ministry of Culture, and I was responsible for the entire province of Siena. So San Casciano, as the southernmost site, was really not my priority. I had Murlo, Chiusi, so many different sites that I had to take care of. So San Casciano was really far away. But the first time I arrived in San Casciano, I find something different. First of all, the pools, of course. These are the pools that were done in the 1500 on top, as we will see, of the Roman and Etruscan sanctuary. But it was impressive, the love of the local community for an archaeological heritage that was invisible. Because regardless of ruins that were not visible, I mean, there were like pools of the Medici period, nothing was there. And the fact that these are hot pools, you can see it very well from the slide to the right is a photo at the beginning of January in which you see the shrine, the sanctuary, that it's clear because, of course, you have snow everywhere and the hot pools. And to the left, it's the location of the Bagno Grande. This is the name of the pools, which is also called by the locals the Sacred Mountain. And it's only one out of more than 40 hot springs of the village. And it's fantastic because 6 of them are related to archaeological sites, both in Etruscan and Roman times. And if you compare the chemical properties and physical properties of these 6 springs, they are the most powerful. This means that it's clear from an empiric point of view, the power and the benefits that were coming from the hot water. But let me introduce you the real protagonist of this talk, which is the water, the spring. You see to the right, people is taking a bath in the public bath because these pools have always been freely accessible for public. And then to the north, just 10 meters to the north, the spring. The spring comes out from a deep deposit of 5 kilometers and water rises up at 42 degrees Celsius. And that's it. We knew nothing. We know that there was an earthquake here in 1575. And when the Medici family from Florence conquered this part of the region, they found 2 altars, Roman altars, close to the pools. And you see one of them to the left, which is sacred to Asclepius and Igea. And then they built a small portico, a small structure. And these incisions, which are beautiful, they were done by a medical doctor in 1688 and portrayed the different type of medical treatments that would taking place still in the 1600s. So the stomach bath, the head bath, the anus bath, and the crowning. Now, the Medici destroyed whatever was there, built this small structure, and moved everything 2 kilometers, a mile and something to the south, and built a beautiful portico of Ferdinando, which is, by the way, on top of 2 different Roman springs that were using during Roman time also. And this beautiful portico was public until 2003, and then for a series of different reasons, it became private, and it's a 7-star spa overlooking the valley of Paglia. It's a beautiful place to visit once. But inside the portico, 11 artifacts were preserved since the 1500s. Among them, a beautiful marble copy of the Aphrodite of the Dalsus type. So Aphrodite is taking a bath, Sese Lavantem. And it's been there forever and always recorded on all the accounts of whoever was visiting the area. But after that, there's not much archaeology story at San Casciano dei Bagni. This is impressive because if you compare this with Sarteano or Chiusi or other nearby villages, you would see that this is like a hole in a map. But this hole in a map has a reason. Now, if you look at the map to the left, you see a blue area. So what is this? This is a time in which in 1993, the local mayor, so the head of the municipality, went and knocked at the door of the Ministry of Culture and asked that an area that from archival news sources, as we have seen, and some memory and few artifacts scattered on the ground, there had to be something. It was the Sacred Mountain. And because there were a lot of different cadastral plots and it was private, basically, the state had to protect it. They were worried. What happens if they build a hotel on top of this? So the state, and Australia at that time, decided to protect the area, an area in which nothing was visible. And then on the other side, you see the one in red. That's the time in which in 2015, it was approved by the state and the region, the landscape decree of Tuscany. This is a time amazing in which regions and state decide together, how do we have to envision our future? What do we have to plan? And this area had been red. So it means that this is protected, although nothing was visible. And this is when we arrived. So let's bring some visibility to this invisible landscape. Let's unlock the sacred landscape. So I met Emanuele Mariotti, who was the field director at that time. He's an expert on geophysics. And we said, let's try to move beyond surveys and let's try to use geophysics to see what's there. And it was extremely, extremely productive because for an area of over 4 hectares, so extremely big, there are structures everywhere. And especially in the area close to the pools. So exactly close to the Sacred Mountain. So this gave us the idea that that was the spot that we had to hit for excavation. A spot that for the local community was also the place, you see the photos to the left, where they were washing the clothes after funerals. So it's called La Fontana dei Morti. It's really related to the life of the living community. And the first year we found nothing. And this is part of the rhetoric about discoveries. Now we were on all the news and it seems that, wow, out of anything. No, archaeology is not like this. There are ups and downs. So the first down was, and so this is when we built the project, Emanuele was directing, I was still at the superintendence at that time. And you see students from Cyprus and from Dublin and some of the Italian students that were like excavating basically in the mud. We found like a late 19th century small wall, which I wouldn't like complain, but like it was nothing as we could have expected. So, but at that time, one important thing is that we learned that we were excavating in a very peculiar environment, in an environment that was resilient because still people were taking baths. And so this is one of my Cypriot students, like with the total station working while someone is still taking a bath. And I would like you to know that the same person will appear in many, many slides over the year. Okay, so basically at that point, we moved south of the pools because for the first time, Emanuele was able to enter inside the field that was an abandoned orchard. And visible in the fence, there were 2 columns. You see travertine columns to the right. Now, these columns, as we say in archaeological terms, they are flying, meaning they're not really related to a layer, but they were replaced by a farmer. But the funny thing is that this farmer in the late 19th century, when he placed these 2 columns, did a philological operation because they're exactly at 10 Roman feet of distance. So we were like, oh my God, we have a temple, standing temple, so let's excavate here. And it was amazing because the local municipality, who's been sponsoring and funding the entire project from the very beginning, such a small municipality, so undertaking costs of living, of all the students, all the professors, etc., they bought also the plot. So to allow research. And here is it. First thing we found were traces of different channels trying to drain water and the remains of the actions done by the Medici in the 1500s to remove and bring away the artifact. But then underneath this destruction layer, the sanctuary came out entire and intact. And this image is particularly important because it really gives a sense of what we're doing there. To the right, again, people are taking a bath. Then there is a fence and you have the Roman sanctuary to the left. 2 different stories. These 2 different stories, we also calls us for using a specific language on the excavation because, of course, people needs to hear, but it needs to be careful what we say. It's really the core of excavating a living excavation. And then another particular characteristic of this process has been the continuous communication. So against the long tradition of Italian archaeology that denied the importance of making public what you're excavating, which is not anymore since a long time, so we're not the only one doing this, but weekly based or like monthly based, we've been presenting in the main square of the village what was going on in the excavation. And this has been extremely important because it goes against the idea that if you narrate something that you're going to have looting. This doesn't happen. And this is the same time, the second thing we did was insane. I was still at the Superintendence at that time. We had the entrance is a beautiful neo-Gothic castle. So we decided that we had an empty space at the entrance, and the mayor, Agnese Carletti, said, why don't we try to bring some of the artifacts coming from the excavation on display? And this is it. We created a small museums bringing the first artifacts of 2020, including the stone altars with the dedication that we're going to see in a while. And it was the idea. So whoever enters the building goes to pay bills, have to go fight with the technical office to get some permits, still passes into its identity. And this is a way to tell people why San Casciano dei Bagni is called dei Bagni. Where are the baths? These are the Roman baths. And then thousands of people and visitors came continuously to the site. We wanted an open excavation, an excavation that was visible to everybody. So at the beginning, we thought we were facing a semi-rectangular building open to the south, as you can see from the slide, with a circular maybe pool at the center where we imagined people were taking baths. But from the very beginning, from the hot water, we didn't have only bricks, or we didn't have only elements that were related to the life of a normal complex, thermal complex, but we started having a few at the beginning, bronze objects which represent parts of bodies. You see ears, foot, fingers. And then the water was rising up. And this started the other part of the story, which is how complicated in terms of technical, in terms of engineer of the excavation, because we need continuously to work with the water, because the reason why the sanctuary is there is the water, but is also the strongest enemy of the excavation. From the hot water, again, the first year, a beautiful marble statue of Hygieia, the goddess of medicine, who was already mentioned in the altar together with Apollo and Asclepius, appeared and was studied by Massimiliano Papini. And then this is how we imagined the sanctuary was. That's also how we published it. So a small building with this portico in the center, sort of in atrium structure, and this circular pool in the very middle. So that was a mistake. And it's part of the game about publishing fast what you excavate. So first of all, we started hitting the excavation of the circular pool at the beginning. And we were expecting to have very, like, say, 25, 30 centimeters of stratigraphy, and then the bottom of it. Nothing like this, because from the very beginning, apart from the fact that it was extremely difficult because of the mud, the hot mud, 42 degrees Celsius, which I don't know how much is it in terms of Fahrenheit, but it's really hot. And then the first element that made us understand that we were not facing a normal pool for a natatio was the fact that on the southern side of the pool, it appeared a block that represented a bull head. And it was abutting the other blocks, and it wasn't clear exactly what was the meaning for this. Then the meaning was revealed with the continuation of the excavation, because this block covers a 25-meter long channel, which is the overflow channel of the pool. So this means that in antiquity, the water would have arrived at the mouth of the bull, which have been drinking the hot water and pushing it away. And as you see, the structure of the pool is not circular at all. I'm going to return to this. So the first thing that we understood is that the life of the sanctuary, for the moment, ends at the beginning of the 5th century CE. That is the time in which the large columns of the shrine are laid inside the pool. When I'm saying I'm laid, I don't use the word pushed, because their location is not technically, doesn't fit a collapse. It's something that's been laid inside. I know it from the architects, not myself, of course. So that was a deliberate action of dismantling the shrine. This process, as you can see from the map, according with different columns, has destroyed the sanctuary on the side, but has also preserved its context. So who is acting? Are the new Christians of the area, when the new wave of Christian power has arrived and these cults needs to be closed, as in Theodosius' prescriptions, or is the local community, the pagan local community, trying to protect what's in there? or is the two things together and we need to move a little bit beyond categories, and this is more hybrid, that how can we imagine? But anyway, we started excavating inside the pool. First, together with the votives that were related to parts of the bodies, and we're going to return on this, we had these two clubs, which were, of course, miniaturistic. In bronze, we thought of Hercules right away. And Hercules, as you all, or Hercle for the Etruscan, is related to the protection of sacred springs. But then another characteristic of this water is that throughout its life, for 700 years, we have hundreds of offerings, in organic offerings, in fruit and parts of trees. Especially these are stone pine cones, which they do not belong to the area. There were not pines there. So it means that they've been moving. So as much as we imagine the cultural biography of the artifacts inside the pool, we should also imagine the cultural biography of plants and fruits which arrived to the pool. And then the first year in 2021, altars appear. This is the moment in which we started raising them from the mud. You see some words. And you see at the beginning, they were all lined on the edge during the 3rd century CE of the pool. These altars are, and this is the moment in, you don't see my face, but like it's the moment, you don't see the happiness, you can see it now. So it's the moment in which we understood that there were altars, and this one is particularly emotional for someone coming from Rome like me, because the dedication is towards Fortuna Primigenia. The altars are sacred to Fortuna Primigenia, to Apollo, and then to Isis. As you see, it's a single deity to Isis, means there is no complex prosopography associated, which means that in the 3rd century CE, Isis plays the most important role. And we know this also because together with the location of the altars, on the rim of the pool, there are footprints. These footprints are filled with lead and silver, as you can see here, and they represented footprints of adults, young people, boys. There are also ears, and there are also parts of bulls. So why is this? This is Valentino Gasparini has been studying this, and in some cases we still have the feet and foot inside. They are the so-called vestigia. The vestigia were a moment in which a faithful were entering a shrine, placing its own foot on top of the footprints and praise the god. And it's part of the Isiac vestigia, which is very well spread out in North Africa. Now, as you can see from the geophysical analysis, the pool, as I said, is not circular, but proceeds to the north. And this is why in the last summer, which was a long excavation of 6 weeks, we took a deep breath. We said bye-bye to the fence in a mediated community involvement program that have accepted to change this landmark of its past. And here it is. This is how we imagine the sanctuary. It's the entrance is towards your left. You would reach this building, and you would have the pool at the very core of it. So the pool is not somewhere they were jumping inside to take a bath. It's over 4.5 meters in depth, and from the 3rd century BC to the end of the 4th, early 5th century CE, receives thousands of votive offerings, as we will see. So this is the image, as you see, it's nothing like the circular drawing that we have published the first year. Animals. Slowly, layer after layer inside the holy water, we started having animals in bronze. And it's amazing that we have hundreds of offerings like fruit, trees, branches, but we have absolutely no animal bone, with the exception of eggs, we'll see in a little bit. So it means that the theme of sacrifice doesn't exist with this water. And you see a lizard, beautiful, coming up from the mud. And then already in later layers, so we are still between the 1st and the 2nd century CE, during the Flavian period, 2 small legs, you can see from the right, started to appear during the excavation. And these 2 legs belong to a beautiful put, a beautiful baby, 36 centimeter long, mid-2nd century BC. So it's an artifact that's been kept in the shrine for 300 years, and then at some point was dedicated to the deities. It has a beautiful bulla, the amulet protecting the life of Quifarin on Possum, those who cannot speak, infant mortality. You know, it was such a big problem in antiquity, and the bulla was protecting. But also it tells us that this is a free boy. This is not something that is for everybody. It had a bird probably to the right and a fruit to the left. This is part of the ritual of the Pullari. So when the Auspiciis ac Triumphis, the moment in which a boy will be used to call for divination, the future, for birds, they will come, eat the fruit, and you will see what comes down from the fruit, and from then you will read the future. And this is just a photo of last week, because the ongoing conservation preparing for the big exhibition that we're opening, I'm going to say a few words about it at the end of June. You see how it's slowly changing, and it's all the mud is getting out of the bronze statues, and also beautiful Etruscan inscription was revealed on the right leg of the putto, as similar to some of the most important puttos ever found, the Carrara putto and the Graziani. And you see from the head is looking at the bird. You see how the deposits, the solid deposits of mud in the interaction with the surfaces of the bronze, also these technical features of the creation. And now the inscription, I will go back on this. So this is the first time in which we have normalized, marginalized long inscription of the 2nd century BC on bronze in context on statues. And then hence, many of them, hence in bronze, we normally find them in shrines in terracotta 99% of the time. In this case, I'm showing this one because in Roman times, it always happens that together with the statues and the anatomical parts in bronze, you see eggshells to the right. These are everywhere. Beatrice De Marchi is studying them. So regardless to the fact that there are no animal bones, there are eggs. So it means that eggs were deposited together with the statues. And the fact that these are later not Etruscan, I mean, it's an Etruscan 200 BC statue together with a Roman lare, dancing lare of the end of the 1st century. So it's mixed up, but it's not mixed up in terms of we didn't understand the stratigraphy, it's that it was done at the later moment of the shrine. And then the first coin came out last year, and we were thrilled, excited. And then the coins started to be on a single day. You'll see the sequence, 20, 50, hundreds. And then we have 6 large deposition of 5,311 coins that from the age of Tiberius up to the end of the 4th century CE are dedicated within the holy water, and the preservation condition of these coins is phenomenal. I used to say to the students, when you come to this excavation, you need just keep in mind that this is not going to happen anymore. So it's really uneducational, because we're normally used to see them corroded, we see them green. So this is, and Giacomo Pardini, who's studying these coins, of course, we don't have to imagine anything like this, sorry. It's not the gesture of a single politician or a single person that goes towards the spring and throws a single coin. But most of the time, we have groups of 400, 500 coins, freshly minted, so they haven't circulated, as you can see from these beautiful Pax of Vespasianus, that arrive directly to the shrine. So from Rome to San Casciano to be dedicated inside the spring. And it's amazing that there are peaks into the use of the coins, and I'm going to return on this tomorrow, and they correspond to the moment in which the sanctuary is restored. I mean, imagine living on a very unstable surface because of the hot mud. There's been 5 or 6 times restoration and reconstruction activities, and they are all celebrated with the dedication of coins freshly minted into the pool. But now we enter into the story before Tiberius. So before the pool that you have seen with the travertine blocks beautifully, that has a life that from the 1st century CE arrives to the 4th century, there is an earlier story. This earlier story is another small pool, you'll see it at the end, which is covered by this pink layer, and it's underneath the Roman pool, the imperial pool. This pool, earlier pool, at some point in the 1st quarter of the 1st century CE, was filled, entirely covered with tiles. Within the tiles, the only artifacts that we found, and it was really impressive, was a bronze representation of a lightning, which you see to the right, and some flints, which are characterized as arrowheads. Now, I tend to avoid and not to like the overinterpretation, but there is a ritual that is well known at Roman time, and it's the echo of a long tradition that goes back to the Ars Fulguratoria into Etruscan time, and it's the ritual of the fulgur conditum. What is the fulgur conditum? It means to bury the lightning. So basically, according to the sources, if a lightning was hitting a sacred place, whatever was touched by the lightning should be buried. We have 12 examples, especially in central Italy, Minturno, and Rome, in Vulci. In these cases, you would find lots of objects and statues, especially buried in a case, normally made of travertine, and sometimes with the inscription. As you will see, this is the very famous example from Luni, in which, in this case, you also have the inscription "Fulgur Conditum," the bearing of the lightning. Now, the form of the lightning is like a long spear arrowhead, and it recalls the Veio from Viterbo in the structure. So what is underneath this layer of tiles? The lightning and the arrowheads. Hundreds of bronze offerings, statues, statuettes, anatomical bodies. They were all piled inside the earliest pool. So that may be the reason why at some point the lightning happened and that had to be closed. This area is called bidental from the Latin sources. It means an area that cannot be seen but has to be seen. And all the offerings after that time were thrown to the south. So this area had been preserved until that moment. We were able stratigraphically to excavate the deposit thanks to the work of Emanuele Mariotti, and then with the coordination of Ada Salvi, who has inherited my position at the Sovrintendenza, and especially with the presence of the conservation of the Istituto Centrale del Restauro with Vilma Basilissi on board. So what we've done is that we've done a stratigraphical excavation within this filling of the earlier pool, and there are lots of different elements that we would never expect. We have trees, standing trees. Some of these trees, this is an oak tree that was placed with all his branches inside vertically. And as you will see, all the statues are hugging some of these trees. We have, as I said, hundreds of different small fruits, small parts of cut trees, branches, which they are so specific that it looks like it's part of the ritual. So we need to expand the way we think about ex votos and try to imagine that we have different social agencies working together, different classes. Comps. We also have an entirely preserved lock of hair inside the water. And then we started having anatomical organs. This is a uterus and bronze. They're very rare, as you all know, from the Wellcome collection. And then we had breast, female breast, women breast. Then it's the second one found at San Casciano. There was a one that was found already in 2004, and the third one comes from the sanctuary of Diana Nemorenza, and it's lost. So it's only here, and it's always in these last two cases related to hot water. Ears, over 14 ears. Now you go to a thermal site when you have problems to your ear, no? But the ear is also praise to me, God, listen to me, God. And in some cases, ears are inscribed, as in this one, in which you see, and this is Mattia Bischeri, one of my postdocs, at the moment in which the ear came out from the mud, trying to read the inscription, which was created by a pointed object. And it's an inscription of the beginning of the 1st century CE that says that a certain Aulus Nonius would have made his blessing towards FP. Fortuna Primigenie, since we had it on the altar, is probably the best candidate. So again, Fortuna. These are some of the ears that you see. Sorry, to the right is part of the hair, but it's nothing to do with this. They are in lamina. They are different proportions. And then we started having bigger part of bodies. Foot, as in this case, a beautiful one, again with an inscription in Latin. So these two inscriptions that we have seen in Latin, remember that the put had an inscription in Etruscan, and this tells that the Liberta, so a freed woman, Minicia Mirine, had made her prayer to Fortuna Primigenia, Fort Primogen. The multiplication of the part of the body, imagine that this is something that we're normally used to see only in clay, that we have entirely only related to bronze. And again, this is not telling us that it's a high elite sanctuary where only rich people is praying. This tells us that's probably the reason behind it, as I will return on this, is the fact that these offerings are done into the hot water. And then we have a series of infants in swaddles. They are normally known as in terracotta, 99% of the time, very few examples from the area of Perugia and from Latium, but they are very small, the other one. Ours are big. They represent infants, as you can see, together with the water. They are wrapped in soddles with the bulla or different fibula or a lunula, a little moon-shaped amulet protecting the early stages of life. And then we started having amazing second century BC statuettes representing offerings. So in this way, is a she's like holding a pyxis to the left and a patera to the right, praising, and it's a masterpiece of Hellenistic art. And as you can see, I was mentioning before, we have these huge trunks, and all the statues, like trees, are like piled around them. So they function a little bit like soana. And the rhythm of the cult, and I should move this just a second because it's such a pity that is exactly where it's not supposed to be hopped on. Here we go. So the rhythm of the deposition is the same always. We have the large statue. This is a beautiful second century BC female that is praying, women's praying. And then we have a series of heads, and then we have anatomical parts to the very top. So it has a rhythm, all these groups that we have inside the pool. And despite the fact that they're piled together in a very specific ritual process, I click on the slide. Yes, here it is. I'm going to continue. They are, in terms of preservation, they're completely different. And this tells us that before the moment in which they were placed together, they have different life within the sanctuary, because technically the condition in which they are deposited was the same one. This is this beautiful first century sea lady, and then together with this one, you see the type of corrosions. It looks entirely blue, and a beautiful baby boy. Again, they're all together with three complete different preservation conditions, but they were laid crossing the big tree. And here she is. She was placed upside down. She's raising her hands towards the gods, and she had the beautiful the hair that's like combed in a phenomenal way, and it recalls models of the first half of the mid second century BC. Together with this, in the same group in the center, we have uncovered what at the beginning looked to be a phenomenal male statue, 3 foot height, so, according to the so-called mensura onorata. So for the Romans who were offering these statues, they had to be 3 foot high. And this one is a naked man with the open hands. On the right leg, there is a long Latin inscription. Some of the details are really beautiful, like the hair. They really recall prototypes and models of the beginning of the first century CE. You see part of the nose and the structure. But then if you come to the body is deformed. So the pectorals, the belly is inflated. It's not it's only a problem of movement, but working with medical doctor, he seems to show almost an image of a rachitic person. And in this way, the inscription gave us an insight, and we really hope that this is true, as I'm going to explain in a second, because he has a name, Marcius Gabrillo, who, thanks to Francesco, that has been helping us into the reading of this inscription, and it's been published by Gianluca Gregori, of course, is a name that is in Latin, but tells us about a long Etruscan tradition, Arcni Crapilo. It's actually the earliest inscription ever found in Chiusi in the 1600s. So it's someone who has Latinized his name, would have dedicated the hoc signum, this statue, et signa sex, another 6, so we're really hopeful for next year, and femina, which means legs, ab pedibus ad inguem, from the foot to the pelvis, to whom? To fonti, to the spring in Latin. Latin is male in this case. Calide, to the hot water. So it's telling us that this statue is sacred to that spring. And somebody who's really thanking God, thanking Fons, thanking the spring, and have offered the 6 statues and the 6 legs. Together with this, I'm going to move it again because, let me try to get it. Whoop. Sorry about that, because you need to see the inscription, which is down here. We have a series of beautiful bronze portraits. For the first time, they have inscription in Etruscan on the neck as they were trying to speak. And this series of portraits are extremely interesting because locally, 89 BC is the day in which the new flag of Rome substitutes the earlier Etruscan one. So politically, at the beginning of the 1st century, things change BC. Now it's impressive because this portrait, according to Massimiliano Papini, dates well into the imperial period. So dates the ages of Tiberius. So it means that the language that very rarely occurs outside of the area since the beginning of the 1st century BC is still spoken and displayed as an identity marker for over 100 years. And you see the other beautiful head with its inscription, and they all mention the same goddess that we see in a second. Here she is. So underneath these layers of head, here is a female beautiful statue, which we thought at the beginning was Aegea because she had a patera to the right and a snake to the left, and the head was partially damaged by the pushing of the columns, but it's a head that has towers on top, which may suggest that it's an institutional gift. It's not something that occurs very often. Now, this beautiful statue has a long inscription in Etruscan on its garments. And this inscription will bring us far away, but it dates to the 2nd century BC, and it's like a textbook of politics of the 1st century BC. The name, here we are. So we have a Scarpe, a name that we know from Perugia, Avile Scarpe, and especially another name, which is a name that it's a gentilicium, that it's the core of Perugia, Velimni, the hypogee of Velumni. And then it says, so this is who is offering. And then for the first time, according to Adriano Maggiani, it says Persas, which is the name of the city, and Perugia. For the first time that appeared on the excavation. Kver, this is sacred to. Here is the name of the springs that occurs in all the other inscriptions. I left it at the end. Fleres Havens, to the Fleres, so to the Numen, to the god, to the local god of Haven. So it's not heaven, of course. What's the root of this Haven? Adriano Maggiani has recognized the root of Haven into the same root of Aventine, one of the hills of Rome. Now, Varro, one of the Latin writers, says that, there was a river, a sacred river from the Aventine that gave the name Aventine, which means the spring, and it's an Umbrian word that it's inherited by Etruscan. So we may translate this as the Numen, the god, the goddesses in this case, of the spring. And this is amazing because together we see the coexistence for over 100 years at the shrine, Etruscan on a side, Romans on the other. They are all praising the spring. Fons in Latin, havens in Etruscan. And underneath this deposition, here he is. Apollo came out from the mud. At the beginning, this is how it looked like, and the slide should be called. This is not Pompeii, although it looks like. And in this case, is a beautiful representation. He's holding a bow. He's almost dancing. Now we are preparing the way you will have to stand at the Quirinale at the exhibition. It's complicated because we are trying to understand how was standing. It's really dancing. It's very difficult, but it dates to 100 BC. So it's really at the passage between the 2nd and the 1st century BC. It has amazing elements in the portrait, parts of recalls like painting elements, but I'm not going to go on to this. And then here it is. This line that you see is the earliest pool. What was there before it's been hit by the lightning and filled by statues. And at the very end of this story, on the bottom of a layer that we have just preliminarily excavated, so that's going to tell us something about next year, a beautiful male statue wearing a toga came out. Here he is, came out from the filling of this sacred deposit. He has elements that would recall right away the Arringatore, the very famous statue that is displayed currently in Rome, but in the Museo Nazionale in Florence, and comes from the area of Perugia. He's wearing the Roman toga, the classical carige, and this is part of the conservation. This photo is just from today. And you see he's already dressed as a Roman, although the chronology, it's still in the middle between the end of the 2nd, early 1st century BC. And this brings us back to the water, brings us to the idea that regardless of time change, rites change, we have a continuous use and continuous use of bronze into hot water. Before are the statues, and there are the coins. So it's a process that is called the substitution process that we see elsewhere in the area. Now, the holy water calls for offerings in fruits and branches of trees and bronze. And I would like to close saying that this is also a normal excavation. The excavation that is an everyday excavation, it's a training excavation where we train generation of new archaeologists in stratigraphy, in understanding how complicated is working on a difficult hostile environment, which is the reason why we are there. And also, I would like to spend a few words saying that this has been entirely funded by the municipality. And now the Ministry of Culture has bought a 1,500 beautiful palace in San Casciano that will host the National Museum for the artifacts. But this is also thanks to the support of different companies and foundations, Ergon, Eureka, Castello di Figline, Vasepi, and especially Friends of Florence and Castello di Banfi. So this is to say that as a best practice, we also learned as Italians that we're very skeptical in terms of interaction with private funding, that it's only through collaborating that things can work. And these are all this over 60 scholars that I involved. Basically, I begged to be part of the project because at the beginning, every day was a different question, a different problem was arising. So slowly, we came as a group and there is space for everybody. As it was welcoming the sanctuary in the past, this is how we envision the work. And these are all the students that took place to the excavation over the last 3 years. And I really would like to thank all of them one by one, because working in the condition of 42 degrees outside, the water is very hot, 25 liters of water per second enter inside the pool. So this is extremely complicated, but allowing us to do a proper modern archaeological stratigraphical excavation, this is the real goal. So beyond the rhetoric of the importance of the statue, of the context, its importance is into the possibility of expand our knowledge of votive religion, of social society, an economy of the past. Now, at the end of June, we are bringing San Casciano at the Quirinale. So we're opening an exhibit that will be displayed in the presidential palace that's going to narrate not only the beautiful statues, but the entire context, the entire story. And we hope that visitors will have the possibility of immerse themselves into this sacred landscape and understanding how complicated archaeology should be, but at the same time, how important is to dig and continuing digging to inherit our past. So just the last minute, I thought it was nice, because it's never been done, to bring you inside the excavation for a second. I'm bringing you to the very, very last day of the excavation of last year. It's a very difficult moment. It's the time in which the last statue rises up from the mud. And with these images, I would like to thank you. Mamma mia. Questa pianta di guardalo qua. E voilà le dernière. Thank you very much.